Howdy, my friends. I'm back, and today I'm here to talk with you about something that is extremely tragically common, and that is when you don't know what you're missing. It's the modern normie condition. What are we gonna do? What do we do when we got no clue? When we can't fathom how great we actually are? And the archons blocked me from doing this. They stopped my transmission 3 times. 3 times. I mean, we're talking about some talented scumbags in the second Bardo. And that's what I tell them. You are talented scumbags. You are talented for predators that don't belong in this dimension. When you don't know what you're missing, how can somebody explain it to you? How can a guy at a campsite even begin to explain? What you're missing is everything. If you're a 3-dimensional person, if you're obedient and you don't think for yourself, if you don't have any respect for what's going on in your subconscious and in your heart, when you don't know what you're missing, what is the absolute worst atrocity of this soul-sucking loose farm? Is it this weather weapon that's about to threatening to dump on my transmission with artificial storm? No. It's that every single being who gets a flesh suit body, everyone who gets one of these, must endure in the lunar processing or soul trafficking center between lives, whatever that may be, even if it's not lunar, wherever it is. We've done enough research. We know our memories are wiped, okay? So why are we a race with amnesia? What causes that? Why is the human race a race with almost 96% amnesia? A few people remember. Very few. And that is when they strap, according to the interview with the alien book from the Roswell crash, the psychic nurse that interviewed the alien, released at the end of her life, it's that they strap your essence down and electrocute nearly all of your past experiences, or they try to electrocute all of your memories. You can check back on my video, Memory Wipe Flaws, for how, accounts of how I can remember the, vague fragments and talents that they couldn't erase out of my essence. So the dreaded memory wipe is the most sickening and horrifying part of this whole experiment. Because how are you supposed to learn anything? How is anybody supposed to believe this is a school if you're not allowed to remember anything? But, I am truly thankful to Christ Sophia. And I never saw the word bodhisattva in any Buddhist text that I studied several years, deeply getting into it, up until I think the 1700s, like 300 years ago, which is a really mysterious part of our history. So for all I know, somebody made up that idea. But if I am something like that, if I am one of these people that came down here to try to help this God-forsaken or Luciferic, inverted, sick, possessed society to heal, then, I have to accept that responsibility. I mean, if it took breaking 15 bones and healing them before I got on the mission, I mean, that's how much I had my head shoved up my ass, like so many people. Okay? I am truly thankful to Christ Sophia for life, yet fully sick of this evil trick, of this constant, probably daily memory wiping attempts. Can breeders and any natalist ever agree, or just have animosity toward each other? Would I have to die of a blood disease if I don't move out of this exact place? And, if I was dependent on, pre-10 a.m. sun here? Yeah, probably. Other places, maybe not. Who wants to bring a soul into hell? This one factor can easily make, the memory wipe can make a person hate, fear. And as soon as you're willing to accept the reality of the memory wipe, it can make you hate, fear, and reject their lives. It makes people want to take themselves out. It makes them feel depressed, despondent, anhedonic. They don't want to do anything. It is not enough. It is not enough to suck your energy as a wage or property tax slave. The possibility of graduating the psychological hell realm earth school does not exist if you can't remember anything you learned in all of those other lives. How are you going to ever get out of being forced back into this to work more slavery positions if you have all your memories wiped? You want to flip Lucifer for the bird. You want to make hundreds of videos to expose and talk trash like I did. But you can't, because you can't remember. You're either that or you're afraid too. But the memory wipe is not just, I'm pretty sure some of these chemicals they dump for so-called geoengineering in the night have these similar capabilities. I mean, could wipe the memories of your dreams, and definitely exasperate all the topical illness. All of these things I've learned, all of the great adventures. You know what? I've got to protect myself. On guard. Defend yourself. They're gonna try to shoot me with some fucking chemtrails again. Weather weapon. Hell no. Protect myself. All of the things I've learned in this existence, in this flesh suit, all of the great adventures, the morals and lessons that I, at the end of these sitcom-like or movie loop holographic experiences are gone. And you get on your knees and worship the beings behind this. If you're an obedient, Abrahamic, religious person. All your memories are wiped, are gone, attempted, permanently wiped. But it hasn't always worked 100%, as I said in that other video extensively. Truthfully and sadly, I brought artistic talents with me here. I'd ride around on my big wheel as a little boy. I'd ride around on my big wheel when I was about 5 years old and speak in light language, speak in some other tongues. The reason why I say it was light language is because when I heard these people doing it, it sounded like the way I was talking to myself when I was a little boy. I had no idea what dialect it was, speaking until I saw someone speak this creative, original speech. I'm not saying I believe every person that says they can do that or not. I mean, it does have a certain sound to it. And there's someone I'm going to mention in this video who I think is an authentic psychic who does light language sometimes, on occasion. So yeah, when I saw this, people speaking light language on YouTube, I thought, that's it. Wow, like, that's what I was talking about when I was 5 years old, you know. My first memory is actually trying to crawl away down a ditch as a tiny infant. Maybe I was trying to escape my kind of Tutmosis in reverse existence, knowing intuitively that in that Muggle family I'd never be respected. Growing up, I was lucky externally, you know, I had all the props, upper middle class, decent public indoctrination centers, schools, white privilege, Freemason family, gifted classes, and all of the Babylon props to serve my success. Freemason family, a loving, overprotective mom who even drove me to band practice when I was in a punk band in junior high. I had a really high IQ, so high they wouldn't tell me. Did they know what narcissism was in the 1970s? I think they were just beginning to think about it. I had all the stuff necessary for the prescribed normie successful life, the high IQ, the talent. So my other female relative with the MD is starting to tell my mom that, it's because I'm insane that I'm not really wealthy by the time when I turned 25 or so. Yet I was often miserable. I was bullied heavily throughout elementary and junior high school. I'd often sit alone at recess. I hated the infantile ways most kids acted. I mean, they acted like baby goats. I was this serious artist and student even as a little boy, like as far as studying anthropology, and most kids acted violent or harassing. I began to hang out with seniors when I was either that or they were the flying monkeys for the bullies and the narcissists. I began to hang out with seniors when I was in junior high school, and I got beat up in 7th grade, and my dad was a banker, so I went to private school for one year in 8th grade, and got pretty well verbally harassed there, but not physically so much. But the class clown called me Smiley, and I dated a senior. She insisted I take her to the prom. I believed in soulmates. I dated a senior when I was in 8th grade, and I hung out with several other seniors, and that's when I met Dan. Dan was a senior when I was in 8th grade, and I believed in soulmates. Addiction was my in to the loose generation serial idealizer, as Sam Vaknin calls it. I was so brainwashed by Barry Gordy, I would think I was in love with all these people constantly. If I wasn't dating one, I would be thinking about another one that I was in love with. That's right, you better stay at least that far away or you're going to die, because I don't like vampires, and you're a little one. You know, I love Christ, but I knew church was evil. I loved to learn, but I knew compulsive Rockefeller schooling was forcing me to fill my head with lies intuitively, or at least lies, illusion, and bullshit, or at least I realized it was good for teaching me to be a worker. I mean, they actually had a thing where you could go to technical college when I went to high school. You could take technical college. You could go to technical college while you're in high school. Maybe they still do that. I knew physically, mentally, psychically, socially, and individually, we had great, vast potential. But for some reason, most in these flesh suits here are not creative. They were not creative. I remember a bunch of kids copied my art when I was 5 years old, and I thought, this is a really weird feeling. Why did they copy me? But the weirder thing was that they are not creative. For me. I'm lucky to have grown up before they actually began taking art classes out and inviting children to after-school Satanist classes and drag queen story hour. By the time I got out of high school, graduating in adult education in a church where I made my own hours. Because when I was in 11th grade, they changed it to where they got really strict on missing days of school, and I missed one too many days, so they said I made an F on everything for that. So I was like, that's done. I'm done. So I graduated in a church basement. And popular lyrics, romantic love always seemed so otherworldly and amazing. I was heavily brainwashed into thinking a beautiful soulmate, you know, the old Motown spiel, a beautiful hot soulmate, brilliant woman could be my everything, my psychologist and my sex fiend, and, you know, have my children and everything. Solve all my problems. I had no idea what a relationship really was like. But still, I'm not that quite, you know, I don't have experiential evidence, sadly. So I believe the Motown filth of romantic salvationism, which is even more, really, when you think of it, if you analyze it or you think of it, introspect on it, it's even more of a disgusting and sick idea than Jesus is going to come save you. To expect your sexual partner to do everything for you. They're going to rescue you from yourself and all your problems. Nope. It is because we are way more peaceful, way more powerful than the E.T. slavers that all this had to be built. Because we're naturally ignorant, loving, divine sparks of the great Christ Sophia in the flesh suits. You see, before the creation of Yaldabaoth through the demiurge, or Lucifer, Enki, or whatever story you want to believe, before the Anunnaki, these junior gods got here, the mother Christ, Sophia, had never experienced evil. She didn't know what the hell it was. You know, so because we're emanations of her majesty, because we are divine radiant sparks of the real creator, all this stuff had to be built to entrap us, man. They had to go to all this trouble. They had to do all this stuff to trap our spirits here, you see, because we're powerful. That all this had to be built. All these insane sprays and 15-minute cities and experiments and all of it. The thing is, like, the vision quest had to be replaced with the conformity of joining a cookie cutter genre band when I was a teenager. The most opportunities, you know, or most teenagers, it seems like that, you know, like you, instead of having individuality, you can choose between, you know, several cliques. I mean, the punk rockers and the skateboarders and The skateboarders in junior high were the only ones who accepted me, man. So, most opportunities for sex and relating had to be taken away by normal circumstances of overprotective parents in the suburbs. You know, when you're growing up and you would naturally be experimenting with children or young people your age, whatever you want to call it. You're a horny little child, young person, miniature little woman or man. But no. And so those, 15, 13-year-olds or 17-year-olds or whatever, and it gets trapped in there. You never get to experiment. Some of them when they get to college over here, and then they have all these people from the inversion cult to pull them into that. Just waiting to prey on those, 18-year-old virgins. And you can kill the dream, but you can't kill the dreamer. My friend Little Creek Walker, or Alonzo, told me that years and years ago, before the sprays were really an issue, before the lockdown, before the war got tuned in so much more obvious. He was fighting the New World Order online at the library years before when I went, years between having a laptop, let's put it that way. I'd have one here and there a little bit. And he was getting stuff deleted on YouTube or wherever he was at, or I think it was Facebook, years before I ever did anything online. And Sun sign Capricorn, and then he got his retirement money, quit collecting cans, and moved away. Around the year I was born, an Israeli psychic named Uri Geller appeared on TV talk shows and demonstrated a remarkable ability. He'd bend spoons by intent. Okay, I think it was around the year I was born or before that, in the mid-1970s. Okay, so this guy appeared on TV talk shows around the world, and he would kind of hold the middle of a spoon and wave it a little bit like this. And with the other, he'd do something, an intention magic with his mind, his other hand. I don't know the technique exactly offhand, but you might can find a video of it. And so holding the spoon in one hand and wiggling it, he'd use his other hand and his mind to make it bend. Well, hundreds of children saw that video, and they did it also in Mexico City and in the Orient and somewhere in China. Hundreds of children were bending spoons. And I'm sure that the powers that be, the Dark Lords that controlled the networks. You see, there was over, I think it was 100 and something TV networks in the year I was born. And that's a grand example of why they had to whittle it down to 6 television corporations by the turn of the century, the year 2000, that were all owned by people in what George Carlin calls the club, right? So, to think, a chosen one, revealing the natural capacity for psychic powers to everyone. Wow, man. The decade I was born in, the 1970s, must have been a really magical time. How dare he? In the same era, John Lennon, Bob Marley, and Crosby, Stills, and Nash, for example, were the only ones I can think of out of a few, maybe Family Stone, were singing about the great oneness and family. Or the Staple Singers and Stevie Wonder. There was only a couple. I could list them all in one hand, probably. Singing about the great oneness and the family to the world in popular songs. How dare they? This had to be stopped. Cracks in the soul-sucking, sterile human cattle energy farm had appeared. The this really long documentary made by someone in one of the 300 richest families in the world, a woman who was a rebel. I think it was called The Ring of Fire. In the very first years of YouTube, she kept posting it and it got deleted, and you might could still find it. It's like 6 hours long, and it goes back, traces the powers that be back to the time when Christ, Yeshua, was in the body. And she says that the Rothschilds, I think, funded Osley, according to this documentary, to do the acid test, right? So, to stop the war protest movement. And for 53 years, until 2 years ago when I was so moved. I saw the hundreds, or maybe 2,000, Keith estimates 2,000 people sitting Indian style, blocking the road in front of UCSC to protest the Gaza attack. That was 53 years they stopped the war protest movement on campus by killing 3 students in Kent State. And the acid test, in my opinion, my estimation, both that and the acid test. With the acid test was where they'd have these big, huge, free wild parties in many different cities where there was a lot of hippies, and give out free LSD. And according to that documentary, they'd have the local emergency units stocked to the brim with antipsychotics so they could pump, these people with there's actually a crazy house, and my guess is that after seeing experiential evidence that there's a crazy house for people like this in downtown Santa Cruz, where it's all hippies who took too much, and then they pumped them with this antipsychotic, so they're pretty well out of their mind. I mean, they function like a 3-year-old child, kind of. And so, and that was an example of, this, that they couldn't allow this, they had to shoot these people, or kill these singers or top hit singers that sung about the great oneness, They stopped doing that in more recent decades, but because so many hundreds of us talk about it, but yet also because very few are as charming. I mean, Max Spires, I don't know if he spoke about the oneness, but as the story goes, Lucifer 4 unplugged at least 11 strands of our DNA, and then more recently got the SDC to convince us that it is just junk. That DNA is just trash. So, while our whole massive amount of energy has been siphoned out and extracted out of all these million years of trauma bonds through wars and coercion as the false reality matrix, the human essence sucking energy, human energy harvesting matrix, succeeded and grew as humanity accepted the false kingdoms of royal bottom feeders, really hell on earth. Those who were willing to kill and coerce and convince the natives that they were the gods, or kill them if they didn't worship them. International violent-based scam, inverted, coerced reality. Over the hundreds and thousands of years, metastasized like the malignant tumor it is, and took festering hold over many regions over the tortured centuries, until, like the Salem witch trials, Salem witch burnings, all of the independent, really sovereign activities, beliefs, and structures had to be removed, burned down, gaslit, or bullied out of existence. Because it's wrong for you to think for yourself if these dark creator, false junior gods are going to have it all. for the M.M. to take over a century ago. Herbalists and organic healers, chiropractors and energy workers, psychics and shamans had to be rendered, and the meme they used was quacks. Quacks. Ducks. To be shot down in a game called The Matrix. Would anyone ever accept the health-destroying and often lethal, quote, side effects, which thank the goodness of the divine part of the Constitution that gave us the FOIA, the FOIA, of the big human pharma's petroleum-based, often remedies, or all of them maybe. Petroleum-based remedies if they could heal naturally for a fraction of the cost. No, Josh, this entire globe, or whatever shape it is, isn't just a hell realm. It was repurposed by a very powerful, thuggish, demonic, archonic force, and their human proxies, and all these armies, and all the cops, and all the people that obey the letter of the law to a T, to make it a hell, to be here the way it is, a psychological hell. Surely Robert Monroe was channeling Enki or Lucifer when he said this place was created as a louche farm. Maybe it is my rose-colored glasses, you know? Maybe it's my mommy's Pollyanna Libra rubbing off on me. Maybe it's the unaware side of me still that hasn't discerned it is totally that I agree with you fully. You know, maybe it's my optimistic Sagittarianism influencing me to make this intuitive claim. Maybe not. Maybe this planet is way older than the Anunnaki narcissist who created the Matrix. For I have had a glimpse. I have had some small taste. I'm not saying I've had a lot of experiences or as many as I really feel that I need to fully actualize, to fully heal the flesh suit, to ascend, to, you know, it's like I even block out my remote viewing unless I change, you know, so I have a lot of shadow work to do with it, but, you know, especially when I was younger, I've had a glimpse of some small taste of the real I Tai, the actual organic, mutable, real, original human experiment. And I've proven to myself a little bit through this experiment that, you know, I'm not going to act like David James Rodriguez about it and advertise. And if you don't advertise, the system of lies and energy extraction can be greatly reduced. But if you advertise, you know, they can, you know, they don't. I mean, I'm not popular either, like on that level. So if you're popular on that level, where you have tens of thousands of subscribers, and you advertise that you're an anarchist, and then you teach people how to be a good anarchist, hundreds of people, it was like a target was put on him for that. So I'm saying we have to be strategic about how we share information. But the point of this last little ramble that I didn't come from my notes is the freedom has to come from within. That you have to reclaim as much as possible, not just your mind, but the free to being free, your essence, your ability to have your rights. You don't have them unless you sculpt them out of the muck, the quagmire, the muddy quicksand of the hell realm's psychological warfare that are all lies and suffocating lies. Through numinous experiences at concerts, through sexual encounters that brought me out of my body, I feel like I've had a taste of it. So, and it is really good and divine. The opposite of the morally pathetic Quippeloth matrix that has no respect at all. Hidden behind the scenes is not just SRA, child abuse, adrenochrome harvesting, amazing levels of narcissistic abuse and harm. No, not just that. Not just weather weapon attacks on the external service. Can you remember how the sun feels on your skin on a geoengineered, cold gray sky? Because that's a pretty decent analogy for how it is. And that, pretend like, okay, well, you haven't seen the sun your whole life. Well, that is similar to how most spirits in human flesh suits are about their psychic abilities, their divine powers. Their junk DNA is junk because they believe the scientism death cult. The true value of your essence has been powerfully hidden. And this weather warfare, even if it's subtle and it doesn't kill you, it's still on that subtle level blocking the healing, not only the healing of the sun, but the multidimensional capacities, the expansion of your skills of telepathic awareness that you might possibly attain from sunbathing. It doesn't just heal your broken bones or help to do that. It also helps you to expand your awareness. It doesn't just make skin disease go away. It makes it helps you sleep at night. It gives you melatonin. It brings many, many nutrients, not just vitamin D. Many subtle, etheric downloads, as some claim, I think is strongly possibly true. If this place was to remain a loose farm, you could never hear of Uri Geller or Bob Marley. You could never listen to Sean Bond or go to his YouTube channel, Psionic League, and hear him talk about how he does psychic powers. You could never watch the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats and learn from Hollywood how to do psychic powers. You could never know about remote viewing, remote healing, intuitive mastery, or real natural healing. Sunbathing had to be called dangerous, In the same era, which was about roughly a decade after the Zeta Greys were involved in creating these three-letter groups that have helped to create this, or channel this pathological technology that's so brilliant and wonderful, yet so harmful. Somehow they were amazingly sick and twisted and demented and horrific. But, when you think about the generation of Loosh as the, number one priority to create so-called fast food and all this hydrogenated oil everywhere in the 1950s, and tell people that margarine was more healthy than butter. It's like, wow, man, that generated tremendous amounts of Loosh. And it really kind of brung in a strongly anti-human force into bodies in this way. And so, similar to that, at the same exact era, they said, slathering this extremely cancer-inducing commercial sunscreen, because it had all these insane chemicals in it, it was encouraged by the mainstream media, the commercials, to prevent sun they told you to rub this stuff in that knowingly. Later on, they had to, I don't know if it's still on the market or not, but it's been proven to cause all this skin cancer. And they told people that putting this on your skin blocks out the sun, which causes cancer, which I've experienced too in the controlled amounts to be very healing. So, I'm not an MD, I'm not a dermatologist. I'm talking about my experience here. So, blue light screen, on the other hand, blue light screen addiction was built in and encouraged. The video I put on my post where Jack Cruz mentions that was deleted. Alphabet YouTube finally started cracking down on Dr. Cruz's talks, I guess, after several years. This is why he never had a podcast, obviously. So, through this mainstream media, sick Luciferian humankind capture, we also saw the built-in and encouraged pathetically retarded ideas like into colleges, like postmodernism, transhumanism, woke, and humans 2.0, inverted into the faulty conversation, the manufactured conversation. From replacing the true awakening of Christ within you, the real awakening of Christ, to the guilt-tripping, violent killer daddy God's son dying for you, to be a sinner, to remain a pig, to eat whatever you want, to eat all the ham, all the pigs you want, to be a piggy eating a piggy, to pig out and binge at church, to worship the death of someone's body on a cross that might not have, it might be that Yeshua never even died on a cross, but to worship that death cult, to do as you're told, and to get it on your knees, and that's going to help you, as a 3D slave in a permanent chalice. A Bible thumper to the SDC, replacing organic humans with robot slaves. We see the same weather weapons and AI thoughts, AI gadgets, nanotech, and inverted concepts filling in the cracks where the real divine got in and out everywhere, and in no other part of the human life is it more obvious than sex. Just like sunshine, for many people, if they're obedient or they believe what they're told, and the person talking, you might consider one of them, sex has just not been a possibility, a part of their existence. They bought the lie, or they believed that it was wrong, or whatever. So, sure, it makes sense that Inky made sex feel amazing to get us to want to produce children, and parenting can give off the most massive amounts of loosh. But what is sex like before and after the bipedal beast farm of the Matrix forced slavery program? What is it like in other ways and other means? It has been said that before the moon was here, womb men might menstruate several times a year, and the ways of the shamanic culture that came from women many years before the Anunnaki got here, many, probably millions of years before that, before the Anu enslaved us, we'd intentionally reproduce. In the non-hierarchical world of the ancient world, folks had equal respect. Man and woman would intend to channel a spirit here. It wasn't such a torture chamber, or they simply accepted having to consume cholesterol or eating animals or killing and chopping the head off a fish and eating it was necessary evil on this planet, and they accepted that. Or, actually I really feel that, before Enki got here, before Lucifer got here, it might have been that for some time we were vegans, but we probably were more of an etheric form then. Pregnancy was very intentional. And so in the whole debate on, how horrible and evil and cruel it is to bring a child into this world, I often think, again, it might be my rosy-colored glasses, as Josh called it. It might be my Pollyannaism, but what if The Matrix is a documentary to the point where there are souls, like divine beings or beautiful souls, stuck in those pods? And if I had sex with a woman who was a divine being, incarnated spiritual mass, divinity, and a divine woman who knows she's divine, and we could intentionally get one of these souls that are already trapped in those pods, then I wouldn't feel guilty about doing it, about having a kid, bringing him into. If it was the only way, if I knew it was the only way that I could get that soul out of the pod. Now I want to know what people think about that, and I'm going to speak about that in another video if nobody hears it, because I'm shadow banned, But it's a very interesting point I've had that might just be wishful thinking. I'll admit, could be wishful thinking. What do you think? So when they chose to reproduce back in the old days, it was the exact opposite of the animal man we see here today. Just reproducing because someone was sexy or good looking, the female was good looking, or because they're young and horny, or some stupid reason like that. The dumbed down human slave is a shell of his real, original self. And you don't know what you don't know. And what we don't know, most humans, is almost everything. And it's like, how can you possibly wake up when you don't know what you're missing? Christ Yeshua said, "You will do greater things than me." So, when I found David Deidda's book, Way of the Superman or something like that, Superior Man, Way of the Superior Man, I think, on the side of the road, and I began tantric masturbation, like ganja and like raw milk. It seemed to both temporarily save my life, and it's a high, it bliss me out, and keeping my energy within me, and also rapidly building up the Kundalini serpent power. I hesitate to mention it because it's so powerful and so secret and sacred, and also possibly devastating that I don't, it's something that I think has, I almost feel like the Tibetans are right in only whispering about it to their lovers or their highest initiates. These three powers seem to save my life, but in a codependent way. Also, you can become extremely addicted to these things or codependent with them, and in ways that can both cause and heal cancers. So that's the thing. They could also, all three of them could cause or heal temporarily, temporarily alleviate cancers. I mean, keep me from the death temporarily. So it's a matter of quality. It's a matter of discipline. It's a matter of your protocol, how you use these things, how much respect you give to the medicine, how much respect you give to yourself. Because it's Naropa unleashed a serious psychological bomb, literally inside of humans with this technique. It's very powerful, and it can do great harm or great healing. I mean, a lot of these, most of the Dalai Lamas before the one we have now, he's amazing. He's so, how many years on the planet compared, he's the longest lived one ever. Most of them died very young because they lived in the lap of luxury. This is before the Chinese, like with him, the Chinese communists came in and he had to escape. They didn't live this adventuresome life. They weren't forced to live this life on the road like Dalai Lama we have now was. They were living in the lap of luxury and using these techniques, and they all died young, most of the Dalai Lamas. So you see, it can be harmful to know this technique. So in ways that it can make you codependent, and all three of these magical powers can cause mutations or cancers to some degree, seem to free or expand. They can also, to some degree, seem to free or imprison my endocrine system. In other words, using these types of substances can make your endocrine system seem to work better or worse, depending on if you use them properly, these powers. Of course, I was never trained properly, I only use books mostly. And why did the Catholic Church offer Uruguay, I think it was $1.5 million in the early 1980s to evict Rajneesh or Osho, who just leased a house for a year there? Why do you think they would do that? Offer him $1 million to leave. Why did they send in Sheila on an M15 family member to poison his commune in Oregon? And why did they, the Dark Lord's minions, I presume, poison him to death? Well, you see, he was sharing sacred sex. He was encouraging people to learn about it and to practice it. And some people feel that you can transcend the Loosh farm through that technique. But it can also, I've experienced, you can attract gnarly entities. You can, like I say, all three of these powers can go to these extremes of either extreme. True divine coupling, like my audience, shadow band, like whatever my audience really would be if it wasn't fucked with. Most humans, we don't know what we're missing because we've never experienced it, and I've only briefly experienced it. We don't really know what a hierogamic union really is. And as a musician, I hasten to embrace these anti-sexual concepts, because to me, as an artist, sexuality, it's sad to be a double Pisces in this regard, I think, and not just from the Motown brainwashing, but just because it makes it part of my blueprint, it's true, it's just human nature, the yin yang, the Taoist sexual magic, that you're going to have, I don't know, not more than at least 10 times, maybe 100 times more energy and power in your work, your creativity. And so never forget that it's not just to reproduce physically. That certainly is going to generate a lot of loose, but maybe your magic hierogamy could be used to defeat the prison, If that was the focus you go with. I mean, to work on that effort. So, on the surface level, antinatalists make perfect sense. Hierogamy has many other purposes, however, as I just said. Going deeper, as an artist, musician, or inventor, as a creative, is it really good to stay alone and just leave and just focus on getting out of the forced soul trick? What is the most overt obstacle in all of these issues? What is the most overt obstacle? You don't know. Anika, you're right. This life is pure magic. In the original experiment, the original hologram that Christ Sophia gave us free will in this beautiful nature. There is no mundane reality. You're absolutely correct on that, my friend. What you call the hell realm contagion. Reinforcement officers have done a brilliant job in making it seem to many people, even our loved ones here online, as if it is a mundane hell. It is a lie. But the fallen are master manipulators, and the lie seems to stick everywhere. And all this effort I've put was to talk in a mirrored room, so most folks can't remember the magic. Just the engineered, coercive slavery. They never cease to feed loose to their sick masters, yet creatively don't exist to them. Yet creativity doesn't exist to the normies. Creativity doesn't exist. What fucking sick balderdash. A perfect soul theft. Amazing. You might say I have no clue how to relate to these folks, these humanoid 3D normies. But I don't want to build a ship in hell either. I don't want to build a relationship in a fucking hell realm either. So I agree with you there, friends that feel that way. Obviously, wage slavery and fear also serve the very important goal of keeping us all divided and conquered through capitalism. That's why they keep jacking up the price every year, exponential, insane rent, keep going up. As when we get together, we remember. We know what we are missing. Physical togetherness. Do I have to give myself a hug right now? It's okay, Trey. We know that we're here together, even if we have to do it only in two-dimensional electronic Wi-Fi gadgetry. God bless you. The God, divine goddess Christ Sophia within me blesses that within you that created this, Nikola Tesla. We know what we are missing. Physical togetherness, full-scale societal oneness. Large collective peace can't be missed if we are going to be endless war-obeying, loose-causing, slave-flying monkey maggots. We can't remember peace. It's not. It's part of the mind control. If we're going to be the maggot, targeted, controlled, freaked out humanoid slaves, our false God's plan, we are a species of vast, thwarted potential. Okay? That's the reality. Literally, psychically imprisoned gods, junior gods ourselves, in these Anunnaki psychic prisons until you wake up fully, more so. Just like the light spectrum. We can only see this tiny amount of the light spectrum, but it's so much more than that, really. Psychically, most only see a tiny amount of reality. 3D is a tiny part. It's like a goal to render me unable to remember what it is to meet my basic needs. Similarly, Japan is so sexually fucked up and obedient now, more than half the country chooses, seemingly, it appears, okay, to their own words, statistics show from questionnaires, to their own maybe anonymous questionnaires, in their own words, more than half the country chooses to remain sexless and now, or go for a robot, and now it is legal for them to marry a robot. I mean, think about that, how perverted that actually is. Many folks judge me as a loser for being in a camp still. And a lot of folks just hate me for being single my entire existence. I don't blame them. It sucks being single. Often I see how loneliness can generate more loosh than if you actually have healthy friendships. I mean, I've seen that loners, hermits, people that are wounded or traumatized, who stick to themselves, oh, they put off more loosh, man, you know? It's why some people that I've given my card to, you know, a lot of them will never watch this channel. They don't want to know. They don't want to heal. They don't want to know what they're missing. They don't want to think about it. And the obvious main reason for all of these issues is when we don't know what we're missing, we miss out on nearly the entire game of human life. We don't know what it is. We missed out on it. We don't get to have that experience. We missed out. As 3D slaves, we have no access to the real divinity. If you've got to go to work and you're worried about this fake thing called time, I'm running late. I gotta go. I never feel creative in that headspace. We lose access to the real divinity within. What happens after lifetimes and lifetimes of thwarted potential? Well, look at humanity as a whole in the mirror. Taking poverty vows, being an ascetic in a rich town, the renunciate has no clue of his potential. As a virgin, I have no idea what sex and relationships feel like. For loose sucking or for healing, growth, and regeneration, Don Miguel Ruiz says the body needs sex. I always say in coastal California, the mafia pirates, you know, when they conquistadores, when they created the mission system over these hundreds of years, they killed off all the Indians who wouldn't convert to Catholicism, took all the lands, and sell or rent it to us for like 3 times more than you have, or 3 times more than you could possibly afford. Missing timelessness. Most humanoids, most spirits in human bodies are missing the timeless now. They can't be in the now. They can't be in the most essential part of life, from my estimation, which is to actually be able to access the now. What does your soul or essence need to get what you wanted or needed from this life, existence, or living death, or whatever you think this is, a hell realm or heavenly or whatever? What did you or your essence come here to get? It's always a good question to ask yourself, if you do believe that you agreed to this. What did they say to get you to agree to it? We don't know our vast potential. with all this unplugged DNA, until we learn how to do our psychic powers, and until we learn how to reclaim our divinity, or how to learn these skills and get healthy enough to get that DNA back. The false self, on the other hand, has no potential. It's an imposter, a fake, a ludicrous monster pretending to be God. He never learns. He's not willing to do anything to better man or womankind, only to keep him in a psychological prison. Look at normies. Look at normies. Just look. Have the courage. Life is far more horrific, magical, fun, torturous, expansive, sexual, psychic, empowering, and weaved together by the Great One in the endless knot, whether you want to call that Loser 4 or Christ Sophia, or both of them, than they will ever know. All except for the tortures. It's the only part of it. The only part of it the normal person is going to know is that life is suffering. They'll know them. Even in the body, our memories are wiped so frequently. My guess is every night, if they spray certain chemicals, we can't remember the awesome fun or the evil of our past. Unless you really do some deep soul retrieval shamanism or deep shadow work, do some deep psychological inner work, you just can't remember it. I wonder why. But can you remember how evil it was here 5 years ago? How good you felt in your best concert? Do you remember that feeling you felt when you were dancing in the best concert you've ever been to? Remember how good that felt? How you felt when you kissed your hierogamic partner, if you ever got to do that? How it felt to create something great? How it felt when you lost your virginity or had your first child? Or whenever you created whatever your business plan was that helped other people to heal. When you got to that point, when you recreated your life in your blueprint, you remember how great that felt? Why don't I play music now? We could collectively shut down the loose farm matrix if we weren't still mostly box slaves, distracted by our ego, by our shadow, by the false self, Watiko. And if we can more consistently remember what we don't even know we're missing. Our divinity and togetherness, our real, actually based reality. I always say in coastal... I already did that. Yeah. The real version is still there. It's just... This is the war. This is the war we're in. It's not just a psychological war. Eventually, it's going to get to the point where, let's say... again, this might be the Pollyanna dreamer with the rosy glasses, but if people knew the oneness, they'd realize killing someone else is pathetic because it's harming themselves, And so it's breaking the cosmic law, Simply, if most of humanity knew the law of non-interference, you know that war is a crime itself. You know that harming someone else is a crime. You see, awareness is the ideal solution. The peaceful answer is knowledge, the power of gnosis, the power of learning. And so, of course, as much as I've learned and taught here is the tiny pennies in the bottom of a bucket, a tiny fraction of what there is that I could that I would love to learn. And you know what? If this wasn't a disgusting hell realm psychologically, I would like to reincarnate here like for like 300 lifetimes just to learn more, just to read more, learn more, just to read and learn. You know, if I had the choice, if it wasn't a planet based in suffering and eating other animals, you know, if it wasn't a suffering based place, you know what I mean? Like if this inversion was cleared out, then yeah, it's such a great place for learning. And I think that's, you know, again, ideally, if the good wins the war, then it's going to be this place where you can stay here as long as you want to learn. You can stay here as long as you want in this hologram and this beauty to experience the growth through the different flesh suits, but not with war, not with slavery, not with this bullshit fake version, but the real original hologram where you have the free will and you get to choose. And then, but see, the thing is, when you think about it also, that all the AI, all the factories, all the technology we have, if we didn't have this fake ass hierarchy of slaves and evil ETs and partial evil ET humanoid reptilians and, you know, bloodline families and all this sort of shit, we could easily just make all this machinery. Again, this might be optimistic Pollyanna, but, you know, I think we could, you know, create a socialistic utopia where we wouldn't have to, you know what? Put it this way. Michael Tellinger's One Small Village is 0% exaggeration. 0% exaggeration when you think about it. Working 3 hours a week, you know, is all that's required in his vision. It could get to where it was 0, but, you know, it probably wouldn't be that healthy. I mean, it could be 0. It probably wouldn't be healthy for the individual to not work, to not contribute. You know, but what I mean is we could have a totally automated society where instead of the 1% and the disabled and the old and elderly and sick and mentally and physically sick, siphoning it to, you're getting to have it, everyone can just have it, like universal basic income, but not this in this way that stablecoin was written, so that the FED has oversight. Not like this, but like, you know, the Nasara Jasara could be real, but it's never going to work if the humanity doesn't have oneness, if we don't realize we're all the same thing, because it's going to be somebody trying to control it and trick and control others against their will and break the cosmic law again, etc., yada yada yada. So, as you know, this world is really beautiful out in nature, and it's really sick what they've done to the skies and to our human bodies and to our minds and polluted our souls. But you know what? It's your and my responsibility to heal, to clean it up. It's an inside job. No one else is going to do it. And people are doing that in hundreds of different ways. There's tiny home villages. There's so many different, you know, socialist and non-profit things out here in the West Coast that actually are, like Save Our Shores, that actually are doing stuff to clean the physical environment. And there's so many free psychological resources on YouTube that actually are helping people clean out their subconscious if the person's willing to change and heal. The resources are there. It's just that we can be so bullheaded to fix zodiac signs. We think we know it all already. And the narcissist is such a nasty infection in our subconscious. We don't want to listen. We don't want to give it a chance. But when you're willing, you know, how bad does it have to get? How spoiled, rotten did we get to where we're not willing to see something different? You see? Because this is why the welfare line, the country club golden prison cell is very dangerous, because people get more and more stuck in there thinking that they'll be okay, and they don't know. And what they don't know is everything. And I hope if you have the powers to create a great day within your moments, that you can make it great, and those portions of your day that you can steal from the soul and energy harvesting matrix And I hope if you haven't already that, me and you as well, both of us, if we haven't already, to move to a more inexpensive or rural place. I mean, I can, indefinitely be okay here, but just where you don't have to give all your hours for the cube. If you haven't already moved on to an intentional community or farm, a commune, where you're living together, because it's essential. It's essential to take your timelessness back out of the black hole, soul-sucking hole of the hell realm, financial black hole harvest, and enjoy the tremendous beauty of nature, of the part that wasn't destroyed, and the part that wasn't destroyed within you. Loving you, my family.